Hello, hello, and welcome to the monthly Patreon only chat. This is where all chill polyamory patrons, €3 and up, can come and ask me whatever you want the first Sunday of every month at 8 p.m. Berlin local time. And let me just let some people in. So, yeah, this is a place. Hi, welcome. Let me make sure I'm pinned here. So I'll chat with you the first Sunday of every month, and then the Monday following, I will post it up on YouTube in case our conversations can be of service to people there. And I am considering bumping it up to bi-monthly, like every other week. I'm going to poll my patrons because I wind up getting so many questions that I worry I won't be able to fit everything in, and I want everybody to feel taken care of. So TBD on that. Also, I'm not topless. I've got, I just realized that the frame kind of made it look like I didn't have a shirt on. I have a onesie on that I thrifted in Brooklyn some years ago. The chains are from Tommy Vowels, and the belt is from Lash Fetish Gear. Not sponsored. Actually, I'm working with Lash soon on a sponsorship, but those are local Berlin designers that work with kink and fetish gear. So yeah, maybe I'll just do a free plug because I love their shit and that's who I mostly buy from. Anyways, let's get to the questions. I will prioritize whoever's in the chat if you want to drop questions in, but I also have quite a few that were emailed to me. First question. In your interview with Kat Black, you both talked about cheaters and liars in non-monogamy. Do you have more warning signs to look out for? So this person is referencing my interview on my podcast, I Could Never, which is a storytelling podcast about non-monogamy. And I interviewed Kat Black, who is amazing. And yeah, what I like about her is she's a realist, and she's had a lot of experiences. And so basically, while she did tell her love story, she also talked about a lot of terrible dates, a lot of dates with married men who actually weren't non-monogamous. They were just cheating on their wives, that sort of thing. So this question is asking, what do you look out for in a liar, in a cheater, which is tough, right? Because if it was that easy to spot, they wouldn't get away with it so often. So you can't always tell. I want to say that first and foremost, that it is not your fault if you get lied to and you believe it. I think a lot of times people will say, what could I have done differently? How could I have seen it sooner? And I just am like, well, you're harmed. It's not your fault that you were harmed, but in terms of imagining, more preventative, signs to look out for, I can share what I do or what I find something that I would side eye. But on their own, these might not be a bad omen. I think it's just collectively a big picture. So I think the biggest thing is if I feel like they don't let me get close. Again, this on its own doesn't mean they're a liar and cheater. It's just more an amalgam. And welcome to new folks who are joining in. We're talking about signs for liars and cheaters in non-monogamy. What do we look out for? And so the first thing that does come to mind is are they cagey about knowing them very well? And that can happen for a lot of reasons. But if I feel like I'm always opening up and there's vagueness to their situation, if there is some tension or weirdness around where we meet, and we're often going far out of a city center, or we're often hiking and doing creative things that are away, I always wonder are you not wanting to be seen? Especially when someone says they're married and in an open marriage and I haven't, I'm taking their word for it. It can be something that I side eye or that I inquire a bit more about. Again, sometimes people can't be out publicly, they're scared they might be fired. And so that could be a reason to be a bit more, cagey about it. So again, I inquire and I try to learn a bit more so that I don't assume bad faith, but I also don't want to just not notice that. Definitely, I worry about somebody being a fair weather partner. like, especially if they present themselves as something else, right? It's one thing if they're like, we're friends with benefits, I'll see you when I see you once a month. But if it's somebody who's like, I've never felt this way before about you, you know, you are so important to me. And then when it actually comes to talking about the hardship, they're uncomfortable with that. They don't really want to do that hard work. That makes me wonder, like the inconsistency there. I want to inquire further. Also, a huge thing is like, does it bring out the worst in me to be around them? Because if I'm like very anxious, if I'm very jealous, if I'm heightened, if some part of me is picking up on like, I don't feel relaxed around this person, you know, that is good information. Again, we're not always picking up on like what it is, like our interpretation of those reactions might not be accurate, but the existence of those reactions is important in my opinion. And so I try to notice that and just say like, I wonder, again, ask it questions. I wonder why, and to not ignore our intuition. It happened, I'll say this, like, I ended a long-term relationship not that long ago. It was not romantic or sexual. It was very close, though. Excuse me. And we were collaborating on something very closely, and I was opening up a lot, and I was sharing a lot, and I felt close. And then I realized that she wasn't who I thought she was, right? Like push came to shove and I said, hey, you know, I feel harmed by this, or I feel bothered by that. When you did this, it hurt me in that way. And I was like trying to be vulnerable, and I was like pretty teary-eyed about it, you know, opening up. And she was just stone-faced and disinterested in that conversation, and was like, well, you know, too bad, sort of vibes. And that surprised me after a year of being very close. And then in hindsight, I realized like, oh, I actually don't know a ton about her. We were collaborating on this thing. I thought we were building this close relationship, but I didn't actually get let into her world. It was a lot of smiling and charisma and, you know, engaging in how you're doing, kind of like asking me a lot, which can create the feeling that I'm, you know, bonding, and realizing like I actually didn't get close to her. I actually didn't know her that well. And so that can happen. I'm not saying she was like lying to me. It was just more if in general, like if we want to avoid being surprised, like, oh, you're a different person than I thought you were, are we actually getting to know them? Are we actually exchanging vulnerability in both directions? So I think a big one for people who are dishonest is like, do I go into a conversation with them feeling clear and I leave the conversation feeling foggy? That happens a lot with people who have lied to me in the past. Is sort of like, I know what bothers me, and then they convince me that it doesn't bother me anymore. That sort of thing. So sometimes I can notice that happens before I realize it, you know, I walk away convinced, but if I can see this chain of events that happen, then maybe I pause. Wait, am I convinced, or was I just manipulated a little bit, you know? Are they a smooth talker? Are they charismatic in that way? And do I doubt myself more? Do I have weird gut feelings and then try to suppress them or explain them away? And does that happen as a pattern? So yeah, in general, if something feels uneasy, I pay attention to that. And if I feel emergency around the person, if I become a person that I don't like, you know, if I have the impulse to look in their phone, and I don't do that, you know, but if I have that impulse, what is it about this relationship that I don't feel in other ones, you know? So it's tough. It's tough to say, but hopefully that's helpful. Okay. Next question. My partner really wants me to be close with his other partner. She's fine. I've got no bad blood with her, and I'm happy to be around to group events, but I'm just not really interested in putting out energy for a tight friendship. Is there a way to say this without being rude or making his partner feel rejected? Yeah, I mean, you can't force friendship, right? That's not... You can be friendly, you can be civil, like there can be mutual respect for sure, but your partner was trying to urge and push friendship, like then I would ask why. You know, are they uncomfortable that the partners aren't tight? You know, do they imagine some sort of like kitchen table picture and they're trying to make that picture happen, even if it's not really what you want in the moment? It doesn't feel organic. Can we ask, why that's being urged. Sometimes people will be fearful. They'll be fearful if like, oh, if my life is too compartmentalized and too parallel, like I need to feel cohesive and have all the parts of my life together. I don't know if that's an element in play, but in general, like, what is the motivation if it doesn't feel organic? And so, but yeah, I don't try and force anything, because then it feels forced, and then you're hanging out with this person and some part of you doesn't really want to be there, or feels awkward, or feels like performative or inauthentic, and then like that's not really the foundation on which a tight friendship forms. And so I understand, and there's usually like a warm, loving, like good intention behind wanting the thing, and also it's your life. You can be close to whoever you want to be close to. So yeah, is it that? Is it well intentioned, or is it based in fear or angst? Sometimes it would also make the Hinges life easier, like, vacations together, living together, sex together. Sometimes people just really have a fantasy about certain sex, and they're like, okay, now the two of you meet and soon you'll kiss. It's like, can we just investigate any agendas that we have? And there might be disappointment, but we don't want to try and manufacture something in that way. People do that with trying to form triads as well. They date separately, and then they're like, but the goal is a triad. So I'm dating this person, and eventually they will meet my partner and have to date my partner. I'm not saying your partner is doing that. I'm just saying it's like it can show up in that way too. Letting go of other people's relationships is key work in this, letting go of who our partner chooses to date, even if we really don't like them, letting go of how our partner wants to be in relationship with us, letting go of what we want to, and just noticing it and saying it. It's like sometimes I imagine a picture of this person is here, and life would be great, kitchen table would be great if our relationship looked a certain way. And so then I keep wanting that and expecting that, even if that isn't really what we're doing. And maybe I don't actually want that with this person, but they're who's here. You know what I mean? Like, we can even do it to ourselves, of trying to force or manufacture something to fit a picture. And can we pause and see, like, is the relationship telling us how it wants to be, and then we are adjusting accordingly? Or are we trying to impose something on the relationship? Because that often doesn't have as much staying power if it is like coming from here, top down, versus coming from in here, inside out. So yeah, talk to them, and also it's fine to say, I'm good. I don't want to be besties with them. Okay, next question in the chat. What is the best thing about polyamory? I think everyone's answer to that might vary. I really like, in my last episode of I Could Never, I talked to Shreya, this woman from India, and Meghna and Shreya. And I asked them, what does polyamory mean to you? And Meghna's answer right off the bat is, polyamory to me is about liberation. And that hit, and that resonates, and that's the reality for me as well, especially the way that I practice, which is very much trying to challenge hierarchies, or trying to challenge having power over, and instead having power with, and building something like I was just saying, building something from the inside out, based on desire, based on something organic, rather than trying to do what you're supposed to do, because that's just what you do. And that's what I like about it, is the ability to go with whatever feels right for everyone involved, that there's no shoulds. That's what I like about it. Okay, next question in the chat. Best practices or skills to build as a hinge. I have 2 pretty solid connections with 2 partners, but recently I've had some questions emerge around things like differing sexual safety requests, and really wanting to do my best to honor both relationships while not making things messy or reinforcing little power dynamics creeping in. Let me think for a second. So when partners, if anyone in the chat, if hinge is a new term, it's just a person who dates 2 people who aren't, with each other. When partners want different things, I usually return back to, what does the hinge want to do? It's like, what do you want to do? because you might want to say no to somebody and say yes to somebody else. And that doesn't mean the person you're saying yes to made you. You know what I mean? So, like, what do you want? What feels good to you? And then negotiating those based off of what you want, not what the other one wants, if that makes sense. So you're getting a lot of requests that you can then, assess based on these requests of me, what feels like the best answer for me. And then can I go to each of them and say, this feels like the best answer for me based on all the things pulling on me, right? So sort of like if you're dating someone and then a family member needs you for something, or a family member wants something that is at odds with what a partner wants. Similar thing of like, okay, I'm getting requests, all of them, and how can I decide based on all of that information what works the most? So kind of trying to not like put out fires. I think that can be a best practice as a hinge, is like trying to not just fix it and then run over here and fix it, or just saying yes, without actually sitting with it and thinking like, I don't know, is that something I can do? Or would that have a ripple effect in my other relationship? We want to consider what our actions will do. We are the ones responsible for the relationships we're choosing to be in. And so it is more beauty and more expansion, but it is also more responsibility. And it's not our partner's responsibility necessarily, in my opinion, depending on how things are configured, right? If they're in community with each other, maybe it's different. But in general, I don't expect a partner to be proactively thinking about the well-being of my other partner as a first move. Like, we're negotiating our relationship, and then I need to bring into that advocacy for, actually, that wouldn't work with me and my other partner. Can we find a new solution? And so I think there's a lot of like, coming back to center and being the one who guides your own choice, which can very much include saying no to responses. And there can also be trial and error. Hey, this partner and I would like to try this kind of sexual safety practice. What does that mean for you and I? And we could test it out for like a week or a month. Are you willing to do that with me, that I could, be in this way? And then we compare notes, like, because you might not always know the right solution. And sometimes just practicing it with everybody saying, okay, yeah, let's give this a shot. It can like lower the stakes of finding a solution, that you don't just say, this is now what it is now, and be like, I don't know, would this work? And then you talk about it. Shit, that actually didn't work as well as we wanted. Okay, maybe we don't do that anymore. That it can be continuing to morph a little bit based off of the information you're getting in practice on the field. That can also be an element of it. But in terms of best practices for hinges, like trying to not triangulate, trying to not blame one partner for your own choices, owning your own choices, and also not just rushing to please everyone, but actually saying, okay, I hear your needs, I'll get back to you. Yeah. I hope that answers the question. It's a bit broad. I could probably do like a whole, workshop on that. Okay. Next question. I feel the tension between descriptive and, I think you mean prescriptive hierarchies, descriptive and descriptive hierarchies, but I think that's probably what you mean. I feel the tension between descriptive and prescriptive hierarchies. It feels at odd that a third person has so much say. When plans change, it's understandable due to prioritizing kids and marriage. I know what I stepped into. I desire more care, being more part of decision making. I want to be taken into account. I have difficulties asking for something that might not be a desire for them. How to take care of myself here. So to the person asking this, are you the person who feels like you have less power, like you're with someone who maybe has a primary, like functionally a partner who is making decisions on your relationship? Is that kind of the dynamic? Yeah, it's fair to want say in things that impact you, and it doesn't always mean, sometimes people will hear, especially in like a hierarchy that hasn't really been deeply examined, they fear, someone new is going to come in and now I don't get what I want. Like it gets very all or nothing of like, if we include somebody else in the big picture of decision making, if the hinge now has another person's needs to advocate for and accommodate in decision making over here. Oh, I also have to consider that person. Sometimes there's fear in that, longer term relationship. There's fear that they won't get their needs met. And it just doesn't have to be at odds with each other. Welcoming more people into the decision making process doesn't mean anybody's going to get their way necessarily. Oh, this does the little thumbs up. Yeah, talking about it doesn't mean they automatically get what they want, right? It's talking about it. It's factoring in maybe an unintended consequence that you didn't think about and knowing about it before you lock down what you're doing, right? Like including everybody, I think is fair to ask for. And the hinge can still say, I would like to prioritize this. Like the hinge has say in where they spend their time and what they want to do. But I definitely support people saying like, hey, someone I'm not dating is making decisions on my relationship. And I'm not with that, So see, I don't know what's available. I don't know what they're open and willing to do, but I do think that that's fair to ask for. And if they are unwilling or unable to include you in decisions that affect you, then what would you want to do? What kind of relationship would you want to have if that is the state of things? And you don't have to stay in any kind of configuration that you don't feel relaxed in. And that doesn't have to be all or nothing either. Sometimes people just take a step back. Okay, in that case, I'm going to expect a little bit less of you. Maybe I'm just going to make fewer decisions with you, because I don't like the decision-making process, for example. So there can be like dials up and dials down. Be wary of black and white thinking. Be wary of all or nothing thinking, that there's this answer or that answer, because I've never seen that be the case when it comes to relationships, right? But that makes people react with a lot of intensity and militance and fear. I need to get my way, right? Because it's one or the other. So when that happens, I pause. Wait, we just said there's two options. Pause. Black and white thinking. Is that real? And are there actually 20 ways that we could do it? Some of which might meet everybody's needs, So pausing, maybe calming, getting regulated, and then when it comes back to a logistics talk, can everybody's needs be factored in? It could mean your needs still don't get met, right? And I would be curious if you feel differently, still being included, even if you don't get what you're asking for, like if you still feel respected because you were included. I don't know. Sometimes that's the case. But yeah, just being told this is how it's going to be doesn't feel good, with a close, intimate relationship. So I do hope that there is some flexibility there in that dynamic. I do hope that there's some willingness to soften and factor in other people and trust that everyone will still be taken care of. If not, then maybe that's your answer of their current capability to meet your needs, I don't know. Okay. Oh, a follow-up to the previous question. Thanks, that's helpful to remember to keep myself in front of mind in the resolution of things, not be solely focused on fixing or reconciling partners, especially as a recovering people pleaser. Absolutely. So this is in reference to the hinge, but it could also apply to the question that I just answered, because sometimes someone in a third, as a secondary partner, the third person, the newer person who has less power, sometimes that person feels like, I don't want to take up space. I don't want to ask for too much. I should just take what I can get. Like sometimes that person also is just trying to appease. So regardless of what role we're in, can we be aware if we are appeasing rather than doing something that feels right? And is there any bit of anything that could build resentment down the road or, make us burn out or make us break down? Like thinking about it longer term, this is why I mentioned sustainability a fair amount. Like, can I do this? Can I actually agree to this? Can I actually do this? Sometimes a one-off is fine, but in terms of this is how the relationship's going to be mindful of appeasement rather than self-advocacy, because you're in relationship with them. So you have a seat at the table. Okay. Good questions. I know it's really tough. It's tough to speak to because I'm also I'm not I'm not aware of the other people involved and what they'll be open to, right? So if you try to start a conversation in good faith and somebody else is like shutting it down, maybe you don't have the outcome that we would hope for. So, yeah, looking out for people acting in good faith as well, like wanting to be on the same team, wanting to find solutions together. Okay, next question. Maybe you've talked about it before. I'm a new patron and really struggling with losing a long-term partner at the same time as being excited about a new partner. I feel guilty and worried that people will assume I left one for the other when that's not what happened. Do you have any experience going through a breakup while also being very in love with someone else? And how do you deal with monogamous people's reactions to it? Dude, that is real. That is so real that like grief while being in love, like grieving a partner while still loving and maintaining like other partnerships, can feel very disorienting, you know? It can be a source of support. It can also be like sometimes heighten the pain that I've experienced that of I'm so treated great here. Why can't this person do it too? I see it's possible, you know, I'm experiencing it. Why not over here? I want it from them too. And so there can be a lot of complicated feelings that happen during a breakup when you are also partnered. And monogamous people, like even the well-meaning ones, will try and, you know, people just don't know how to deal with grief. They don't know how to support people with grief. Someone dies and they'll be like, you know, well, they're looking down on you from heaven. So like people will want a happy resolution for themselves so that they can walk away not worried about your grief or something. Like that's what I've experienced is people want to wrap it up in a tight little bow. And so I've experienced in terms of a breakup, monogamous people saying like, well, at least you've got your other partner. I'm like, you probably mean well. You're probably trying to cheer me up in a dynamic that you have no frame of reference for, you can't fathom, but that makes it worse. And so I usually just, it depends on who the person saying it is, right? Like if it's a coworker saying something flippant, do you really want to put energy into redirecting that? But if it is a close friend who does want to find out how to support you, you can like, can you say, I would rather you say this. I would rather you not do that. Like, can you please just show up and distract me, right? Like people often need guidance on how to help you. And then if they actually mean, you know, if you need anything, like let me know. If they actually mean that, then let them know, you know, because we can rely on people who are monogamous during a breakup. Like we don't have to get advice from them on how to deal with it, but people know heartache, people know loss. And so keep your support system strong, but definitely you might need to tell them what is and isn't helpful. And people who are judgmental just are going to be judgmental regardless. And I have no problem like shutting people down and telling them, you know, don't talk to me. Don't talk to me like that. This is not the time. You're not helpful, right? So I'm very sorry you're going through that. Yeah, I think another question I consider is like, is your current partner your main support? Because sometimes that as a support person for a breakup can be tricky, especially like, let's say your partner never liked your other partner and like they saw signs and like want to do an I told you so. I don't know your situation, but like sometimes they are a bit close to it to be a primary person for support or the only primary person for support. So can we be mindful of that as like, what are they available to give? Because this specific situation, maybe they're not detached from, maybe they do have their own reactions to. Sometimes people grieve losing their metamor, you know, and they are also grieving. And so, yeah, checking in with where everyone's at and what everyone's capacity is. So, yeah. And then I think just like self-maintenance, routine, you know, that can be very important during grief, like regularity of things to count on, making sure you got the eating and the hygiene and, you know, the basic things that can be the first to slip when we're not feeling right, but then that can make it worse. You know, so it sounds maybe trite, but I will have to do that when I'm grieving is like, wait a second, have I eaten yet today? Wait a second, have I showered yet today? You know, and that can shift the mood ever so slightly and make me a bit more optimistic after I leave the shower. It's interesting. So I don't know if that's your experience, but just continuing to self-maintain as well. They are things that are small that can disproportionately like positive or negative impact mental health. So yeah, and I think like in general, you can lead the narrative. So like you mentioned, you're worried that they will think you left one partner for another, right? So in addition to not knowing how to help people with grief, they might often misinterpret it through a monogamous lens. You're not with them anymore. You moved in with them. So therefore, one instead of the other, when maybe it was a lot more complicated than that. Maybe this was going to happen anyway, and that was going to happen anyway. And the timing created a false narrative, right? So sometimes I'll get ahead of it, I might say like headline thought, this did not happen because of that. I kind of don't care if you believe it, but like, please know that I don't want to hear you say otherwise because this did not happen because of that. Short, simple, clear words. Leading with that sometimes can get ahead of it, of like owning the narrative and coming out strong and saying like, I don't want you to tell me what just happened to me, right? Because you're not inside this, and it actually makes it worse, and it actually makes me feel less close to you. It actually makes me feel angry with you. You can always go back to like your interaction with that person in the moment, and are they really trying to support you? Are they your family? Are they your friend? Then maybe they should shut the fuck up, right? Like if they are being that unhelpful, we can always go back to like a present day conflict with them of like, please, this is what I need to hear from you. This is what I don't need to hear from you right now because I'm feeling certain ways, and you're pushing me away right now. So again, everyone's style is different, and every dynamic will be different in terms of what you feel like you can say to somebody. Maybe saying that to your grandmother is unthinkable, and that's fair, right? So read the room. You better than anyone. Your relationships better than anyone. But I do think that it's good and fair to self-advocate and not let other people define what just happened to you, on their terms. That's not okay. It's not okay. And at the end of the day, like, are people curious? Are people curious about you? Then I put more energy into correcting them. If people are seeking confirmation bias because they hate polyamory and they wanted to be right and I told you so, maybe that energy would be wasted, that precious energy when you're already grieving, right? So I look at curiosity versus, people wanting to be right, or people acting with resentment, or confirmation bias seeking. That can be a signifier of how flexible this person might be. It's really hard though. Okay, welcome to put more questions in the chat. Okay, next question. Is it unethical, in your opinion, to have one person be polyamorous but not want you to be? Yeah. I don't know, in a word, so I am not the arbiter of ethics. So whenever someone says, is it ethical to do this? Is it unethical to do that? I have discomfort with that framing because I don't want to then, in answering it, claim that I say what is and is not ethical and I have the final word, right? So just as an aside, whenever I am asked that, I often will reframe it that this feels productive or unproductive, or this feels caring or not caring. Like, what does ethical mean, right? Respectful or disrespectful? Can we get a bit more specific? Because people will often label something ethical wholesale when there's a million tiny little things underneath it that, some could cause harm, some could not, some could be, good intention, terrible outcome. So this is also why we're generally moving away from the term ethical non-monogamy and just saying non-monogamy, because there's a bit of you don't qualify monogamy and say ethical monogamy. But also sometimes for some people it's a bit doth protest too much. And I'm like, you sure are emphasizing that you are ethical, period. And so therefore there's no further inquiry into what you're doing because you're already ethical. So therefore everything you're doing is ethical. No. That's not, can we just continue asking. Anyway, that is a complete aside from your question. Talking about one person being polyamorous and not wanting you to be is a double standard, you know? Like, why? Why are they asking for that? What is that intended to solve? What is that intended to protect them from? You know, what is telling you or asking of you to have different relationships than they do? Why? It's one thing if you were disinterested. If you're like, I just don't want to date anybody else, like, that's totally fine. Monogamous people are with polyamorous people all the time. It's just a matter of like, who's making that decision. And if it's coming from within you that you have disinterest, or that you realize you just don't experience attraction while you are attracted to somebody else, like, that's a thing. But when it's imposed, I don't think that that is respectful, and I don't think that that is balanced. I don't fuck with like any dynamic where one person is telling another person how to be. You know, we can negotiate things, but if the negotiation includes like you being prohibited from some stuff that they are not prohibited from, I don't think that that's just. I don't think that that is balanced or making you equals. But yeah, that's tough. Similar things with the like one penis policy or no penis policy in some like queer spaces of like just, you know, no penises in the mix. It's like people get really weird about body parts. That can also be similar. It's like date whoever you want, but not this kind of person. I see that in straight relationships and queer relationships. Like, because I would be upset, or I would spiral, or I would feel insecure, or I would be triggered because of my trauma. Like, trying to control your behavior because they don't want to have a certain reaction. And while their need we can still attend to, right? Like, I think it comes from a real fear or a real trauma response. Like, we don't have to say no to tending to whatever they're wanting to heal or prevent or protect. That's why I ask, what is it supposed to do? Because can we know what it is what's the point? Like, what is the ask trying to do type of thing? They can request anything and you can say no if the answer is no. And that can turn into a brainstorm, you know? It doesn't have to be like, no, therefore you don't get your need met. Okay. Next question. Is it a thing that a single person entering a triad can feel like the original couple is sort of taking the role of their parents? Ooh-wee! I don't know if that's a weird thing to ask or if I'm asking it right, but sometimes when they argue, I feel like a kid who wants to keep their parents together. Or if one of them is upset, they both come to me to tell me. Interesting. I don't feel like this in any other relationships, only the triad is that common. Actually, yes. Parent-child dynamics happen in triads all the time. And like, I've not been in a triad in that way, so I can't really speak from experience, but I've seen it, and I talk to people every day, you know, I have seen it, where especially someone who is newer entering a longer term, like with entering a triad with a longer term dyad, it can just be like, you know, mommy, daddy, don't fight. You know, that weird, like, old feeling can come back of being in the presence of a relationship, you know, of just being there and being in relation to them and being newer. And sometimes in triads, the person is a little bit less powerful, and that needs to be rebalanced over time. Like, there can still be a lot of couples privilege, which then positions the couple a little bit higher than the individual, which then can reinforce this like parent-child vibe of like, we say how it's going to be and you listen. And so then that can bring back that like old, I feel 5 years old, you know, why feeling. I inquire about the power dynamics. Like, is there something about this relationship that makes you feel smaller, lesser, like you have less of a say, like you are being told how it's going to be? I don't know. Maybe that's not the case. It's just something that I ask because that happens a lot. You're definitely not alone. And so, yeah, it is an opportunity. This is why when people are brand new to non-monogamy and they're like, let's get a triad, I'm like, oh my God. Because like this can happen where you feel like a kid again. Mommy, daddy don't fight, you know? And now you have to, it necessitates you have to work on that trauma. You have to immediately work on that family of origin pain deeply and intensely and raw if you're going to have a good time in this relationship. If this relationship will be, you know, long lasting, that then needs to be confronted and healed and reconciled, right? And so entering a triad means you might bring up stuff that's long, you thought you were long past or you didn't know bothered you. So it can be an opportunity to grow, but it can also be a fuck ton of work, right? Because we get surprised by that specific kind of dynamic. Not just being two people negotiating a relationship, right? So yeah, when you're feeling like you want to keep your parents together, you know, if that's the vibe, you don't want your partners to break up. Can we bring it back to present day? You're grown, they're your partners, they're not your parents. What are you scared of? If they break up, then what? Right? What are you scared of having happen to you, having happened to the triad? If it turns into a V, do you feel like now you'll be pulled in two different directions? Does that remind you of your parents getting divorced and then one talking shit about the other? Like these things in the brain start to connect and start to relate to each other. Can we see like, what am I scared of with this? Like, why does that set off alarm bells? And how much of it is present day and how much of it is very old? You know, what about the present day reminds me of the very old? Sometimes the present day needs to be reconfigured a bit too, you know? But yeah, just getting clarity on past and present, you know, current collaborative work versus, you know, self-work and internal searching. So yeah, a lot of codependency work, a lot of detachment work, a lot of, you know, while building this this three-person relationship, while strengthening that, you also have arguably 4 or 7 relationships, people will say in a triad. The 4 relationships being like the trio, but then each dyad. And when people say it's 7, they also mean your relationship with yourself, you know? So, but if it's a relationship that you're not in, right? You're seeing their dyad, which you're not in their dyad. That is a different relationship than your triad. So is the triad in conflict? Are you part of it? Are you involved? Like, is it about you? Are you upset too about the thing? Like, is that a triad conflict? Or is it a dyad conflict? Before you even met them, they had money problems and now they're upset with each other about money problems again. Does that have nothing to do with you? Then that's important to name and to notice is like, I might need to detach from their dyad that I am not in. You know, I might need to work on letting go of what I can't control and seeing what my role should be. How much should I know, right? What's appropriate for me to know? Is one gossiping about the other to me? Is, you know, like, is there any attempt to triangulate or get you on someone's side? Or, you know, we want to be mindful of that because that can also then make it a triad conflict. But is it about you? Do you need to be involved? Do you need to be on the sidelines saying like, I hope they find a solution, but I'm powerless over this. It can ironically be kind of empowering to name what we're powerless over, in my opinion, is like, oh, I can't. No matter how much time or energy or thinking I pour into it, I can't do anything about that. I can't fix their money problems if we're staying with that example. Like, so noticing that I'm powerless over that, now I'm kind of free. You know, because I don't need to then spin my wheels and try and figure out a solution and try and keep them together because it's bigger than you. It's bigger than you, especially if it started before you, you know? I don't know what the conflict is, but if you didn't create it, if you're not part of it, then, you know, how much say do you really have in curing it and in healing it? So it's really complex work in terms of naming like what is and is not my business. You also mentioned in your question that, I wanted to go back to this part, if one of them is upset, they both come to tell me. you said. So I am curious about that and what you meant by that. If one of them is upset, then are they now a unit and they come as like a united front and confront you? Is that what you mean? Because that I don't love. Just because, again, we're going back to you are in a triad and you all each are individuals, right? So in your dyad with a person, if one of them is upset with you and the other person isn't involved, it's not about them. Are they now taking a side? Are they now like, kind of pulling a power play on you of like, when we both meet with you, now you're definitely going to do it because we're both confronting you? It really depends on what they're talking about, but like, is the other person involved? Are they in this conflict? And if no, then can you resolve it with them on the sidelines, with them trying not to meddle or get in between? It's tricky, but that can also reinforce this whole parent-child feeling, is that if this couple comes and scolds you together and is trying to tell you what to do or what to change together, if they are saying, we think this, we want that, if they are often using that kind of language rather than I feel this way, oh, I also feel this way, do they have individual separate reactions that maybe have differences, right? Or do they sort of combine into one response? In that case, I really look at, are they trying to make an equal triad? Are they trying to not have this like couple versus the third as their triad? Because that can create a lot of pain. That can create a lot of confusion in the third person. Wait, I thought we were all equals. Like, why am I, now under both of your thumb? Why are you both giving me the silent treatment because this one was upset with me? Now, why is that one avoiding me? Like that, if they are acting as a unit, when the intention is 3 equal partners, I name that. And in addition to healing whatever the conflict originally was, I now have an issue with that. And I want to see, are they willing to detach from each other and see, my partner's distress doesn't have to be my distress. Do I do it like, not absorbing their partner's feeling. There needs to be that work on codependency as well, in my opinion. Like you're not one person if you're in a couple. But that can be an old monogamous mindset of like 2 become 1, and if they're like married for 20 years, maybe they acted 2 as 1 unit for a long time, and they, even if they don't mean to, they're like falling into that as a default. And are they willing to challenge it and question it and start to separately identify their needs separately? That is needed in every triad I've seen that has had longevity, in every triad that I've seen that feels balanced and happy long-term, that work has been necessary. So sometimes people will book a session with me, and it'll be a couple, and they're like wanting to find their third, and they're being sweet about it, and they're like, how can we go about finding our third? How can we do this? How can we do that? And so then the conversation becomes like, why is it a we as a single unit, and are you willing to explore that before inviting someone close so that they can feel on even ground with 2 separate people rather than one, power position, often people don't like my responses because like I want to help them. I want to help people realize the kind of polyamory that they want to have. I don't have an agenda for like how your life should look. It's just when I notice things that might get in their own way, I want to ask about that. And what you're describing, that's often what I ask about. So you're not imagining things. That is a thing. And I would definitely look at it, and hopefully your partners are curious, and hopefully they are softening, in a way of being like open, So it's totally fine if we mess up and we fall back on monogamous scripts. Like, duh, of course we're going to. We've never been in any kind of other way. So like, I don't fault people for falling back into it. It's what happens next. What do you do when it's named? And do they take it seriously? Or do they try to tell you you're imagining things, or that's not right, or we deserve to be 1 unit and you are just the attachable person who then could be the detachable person. You are the moving piece and we are the stable. Like, How are they? Why are there balloons? How do I turn off this? Okay. Do y'all see the balloons? This totally disrupts my train of thought, these stupid like Zoom reactions. Anyway. Um, yes. These are all the things that I would ask about, and my hope for you is that they're open to collaborating with you on a solution and stretching and growing themselves so that this doesn't feel like parent-child relationship, that is very, very tricky and time-consuming and labor-intensive. So when newcomers want it, I'm like, oh, baby, oh, really? You're signing up for like the advanced course, huh? Hmm. Next question. Should my partner be a support person? Yeah, this is a bit of a long story, but the gist of it is like, should my partner be a support person for me in my dating and in my relationships? And I think, yeah, it's a broad question, so I'm a little bit at a loss of how to answer it in a way that will definitely be helpful for you, because what are they supporting you with? So absolutely, our partners are key support people. They know us very well, like if that's a role they want to have. Just because someone's a partner doesn't mean they owe us that emotional labor. It's like, what is the dynamic? Like, I'm not going to ask my comet who lives on the other side of the world to be on call, every time I'm anxious, but yeah, if a partner is supporting you, is there a conflict of interest? Are they supporting you about someone that they are also dating? Can you tread lightly on that? Are they supporting you with someone that they are fearful of or someone that they are skeptical of? Then that could color any, even if they're trying to be mindful of that and give you good advice, like that could color it. I've had partners that thought my other partner was a dick, and was like, I don't know how to say this, like it's kind of not my business, but I have noticed that you seem sadder lately, and so in that way, noticing me, but not telling me what to do, right? Holding space for me if I have emotions, and also expressing concern, but not telling me what to do when it comes to dating. I think that can get really tricky because even if it is good advice, dump him, like if my partner were to say that, that carries implications that if like a friend or a support person who is not, doesn't have a conflict of interest, like if they were to say that, maybe that's a bit more helpful. But if my partner were to say you should dump that person, that could not only be perceived as trying to manipulate the polycule, but could also be perceived as like trying to get something out of it. What do they gain from that? It's like sometimes they are a little bit too close to advise on something. So it really depends on what it is that your partner wants to be a support person about. But I think in general, I love when our partners can support us. I love when we can support our partners. And can we continue to be thoughtful of like, do I have something to gain or lose from the outcome of this situation? And do I have the resources myself to offer support? I don't ask partners to be my support if they are exhausted and burnt out and, maybe I rely on someone else that day. So we want to also factor in, like, do they have the ability to support? So those are some broad things that may or may not be helpful. Like in general, yeah, let your partner support you, but also keep getting outside opinions, keep getting outside voices. Definitely, if you can, talk to somebody who doesn't know anybody involved. Talk to somebody whose advice you would want to take, right? Who doesn't, that's like half of my clients are just like, you don't know anybody. Like, let me just lay it out for you. What's your reaction? It's like, it can be so helpful to just get a detached perspective if you trust their opinion. So yeah, get that too. Zoom out too. It can get tricky when our partners are our support. We are at the end of our hour. Thank you all for being here. I do have some more questions that I will roll over to next time because I don't think, in 2 minutes I'll be able to cover them. I am thinking about bumping this up to bi-monthly, like every other month, because I wind up having an excess of questions. And so I think that might be more useful. Currently with the podcast, I'm like editing, I'm editing a lot. So I may not be able to do that until after the season is over in a few weeks, but that may be something that I put out and like have a poll about if that would be useful. So just to have a space where like whatever might be on your mind, you don't have to wait a whole month to talk about it too. That could be good. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a great day, a great week, and I will see you next time. Okay. Bye.